Right, so welcome to the Recession Rebellion. As I mentioned, Phil's unfortunately hurt his back, so he's off getting a little bit of help from that. So he has my best regards and hopefully all of your best regards as well. In the chat, I've just put in two bits of content. One is CEO Huddle, which is a new podcast interview that came out yesterday that I did. So it's got a nice different range about human thinking, about decision making and stuff like that. And Phil's just done an awesome article that just came out on LinkedIn, which is 60 lessons from 60 days of lockdown. So if you get a chance to have a look at it, it's really good. It's like just a hammer throw of like all kinds of amazing creativity. Today's subject, I would like to be as interactive as possible because in my eyes, it's a lot about the conditions that we're all currently dealing with. So this is our task today, right? Is we're going to talk about the task mindset, how it works inside the mind, and the curse of being busy. I think that it would be fair to say that, like most of us, we're kind of caught at the moment in what feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, right? In terms of like the people that we're meeting with might change, but in terms of the methodology, we're not out in the world, we're not socializing, we're not seeing different things. We're missing an awful lot of triggers that come into our system unconsciously. So if you think about your old habit, if like me, you live just outside London or wherever you live, I used to travel into London every single day. If I think about the walk that I've got to the train station, if I think about all the people that I used to see on the train, if I think about all the interactions that I had, if I think about the amount of cups of coffee I bought every day, it's all little social clues and little things that we're getting inside our system that we've been robbed of. So we've lost, I mean, I wouldn't, as a rough percentage, probably 90%, at least 90% of our normal interaction stuff. So if you think about it at the moment, right, all I can see is the environment that I see all the time at the moment. And yes, I can go out and exercise and I can run, but in a general context, we've lost our norm. And what that basically means is this. So Thinking Fast and Slow, great book by Daniel Kahneman, if you haven't read it. And what it basically means is it talks about the two systems of the brain. So we've got one part where we think fast, we've got another type part where we think slow. And actually, COVID is eliminating the slow in our work mindset. So what it means is that whether we're aware of it or not, we tend to be doing things a lot quicker and thinking a lot quicker because we're panicking a little bit more. Which is not to say everyone's doing a natural physical panic. I'm just talking about the notion and the motion of what's actually changing inside the brain. And it means that the task mindset takes over. And the task mindset is present in all of us. And it's for reasons that I'll go on to explain, because we automatically fill time. And it might sound strange, but that's what the brain's job is. And I'll explain to you why. So just going back to one of the first sessions that I ever did on Recession Rebellion, is that I call this the efficiency trick. And for me, I absolutely love this terminology because it's a great way to sum up how the brain operates in general. So the brain's job, literally the brain's job, is to make you operate as efficiently as possible. And part of that means that it wants to automate as many of the tasks and the many of the things that you do. So if you think about what I was just speaking about, how does the efficiency trick manifest itself from what we were used to doing as work to what we're now currently doing? Well, before, the brain could automate lots of things for me because I used to walk to the train, I used to sit on the train, I used to spend X amount of time looking at other people because I'm all about human behavior. I would walk down to, so I'd have a certain method of getting onto the tube. I would be condensing and processing the day. I would sit down and meet with somebody. I would have had a nice conversation, being perfectly civil with the person serving me the coffee, and it goes on like that. If you think about that, that's a bunch of automated tasks that at the moment we don't have to do. And that would sound like a positive, right? Because if I don't have to do all those tasks, then I've got a lot more free time to think. And yet, that's not what's happening in the world. And the reason it's not happening is that task mindset takes over and we start to fill up time. And we automatically fill up that time. So this concept of Zoom fatigue and everything else, is it real? Absolutely. And this is what I'm going to take you through right now. So I'm not going to leave this. When I did these slides, I was like, that slide's actually making me sleepy and I'm not very good in the morning. So we're not going to spend too much time on this slide. But is Zoom fatigue real? Absolutely. And that's what I'm going to prove to you. And I'm going to help you get past it because the task mindset at the moment is destroying our creativity and it's destroying our ability to think and feel like we've got space to think, which sounds kind of counterintuitive because in theory, in a work sense, we should have more time. But for the vast majority of people, we don't feel like we do. And here's why. So the first boom when it comes to Zoom fatigue is that let's forget about Zoom for a second. Just a normal phone call, it takes 20 minutes for the brain to process a phone call after you hang up the phone. So think about what that's like. So 20 minutes to process a phone call after you hang it up, right? And we'll come back to that point. We check our phones, the average human, 67 times a day. This is our direct connection to attention and to dopamine. So we're checking it 67 times, not because we need to, but there's an attention and there's an addiction and a chemical release that's present for all of us. So even if you only check yours 12 times or you check it 120 times, there's obviously a different range of addiction and psychological association that you've got to your phone. So it's present for all of us, but it's got a different range, but the mean average is 67, which is a lot. It takes the average person 43 seconds to check their phone after a movie starts. So the 9 p.m. movie, or the joke that I make in the modern world, there is no 9 p.m. movie. There's a minor argument with your partner. So by 9:23, after you've looked over every streaming app that you've got, you put on a movie that neither of you particularly wants to watch. That's the modern consumption, right? But either way, it takes you 43 seconds to check your mobile phone, right? Which is just shocking. It's sad, but that's true for all of us, right? So imagine Zoom hour upon Zoom hour. It cannot be processed. Literally, if it takes 20 minutes to process a phone call after you hang it up, the brain needs that kind of headspace to process it. So you can be busy doing something else, but if you take another phone call, it can't process the other one. That's the way that it works. And the reason that it works like that is that there's a lot of emotional context going on. So you sitting on a Zoom call, even though you're listening to this Scottish dude rant about Zoom stuff, right? You're still more emotionally alert because you're trying to understand the message that I'm saying, and you've lost the ability to read me. Meaning that you can get an idea, like if I'm like this and just looking away, right, you've got a very strong indicator that I'm distracted. But what you do lose on Zoom is the emotional connection to me. Because normally 70% of what we communicate is non-verbal, right? But you can't see the little markings of how my eyes move, the little bits of body language, the little nuances, the little cues get lost in Zoom. So what's really kind of ironic, right, is that in real life, we've got the emotional read on things. When we're on a phone call, we need 20 minutes to process it because we can get an emotional read by somebody's tone. And the reason why it only takes, I say only, but it only takes 20 minutes to process that is because you can listen and understand the emotional context. So the 20 minutes of processing is you connecting the dots to the message of what people were saying, really getting it into your system, right? But in Zoom, we can't do either. We can't do the real life read. And it's much more difficult to just read stuff on tone because we haven't got tone. We've got all the other components for it. So I don't have an exact clean answer, but I believe an hour Zoom call takes at least 30 to 40 minutes for you to actually process because it's even more complex. And unlike a phone call, I don't think it's a direct line of processing. I think it's something that takes a long time. So if you think about all the Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams, if you're unfortunate to have to use that, just showing my Microsoft bias, all these different types of mediums are meaning that we're overloading our system. And we're overloading our system on purpose because the brain is automating us to make us as busy as possible. That's the perception. So we've got a calendar issue. That's my core message of today. So I'm more than happy to take any questions about this as we go. I wanted to make it quite a short session because my theory was that there might be a lot of questions depending on what's going on in your life and how you're managing your work situation. But here's my tips. So when we're busy, times the task mindset, times Zoom fatigue, is we're literally generating overload in ourselves. So one of the reasons, I've spoken about anxiety and stuff that's generated because of the crisis. One of the reasons why we can feel a little bit overloaded, a little bit overawed, is that we're not managing our time in the correct way, which means that you could be doing a perfectly normal 9 to 5 type existence. I'm talking about what goes in that 9 to 5. It's not about overworking in the sense of time of a day, but it is about overworking in terms of what you're putting into the brain system, right? So number one, you need to literally put limits in your diary. Here's the tip that I would give you, and my wife and I are both working on this, is a 4-hour maximum per day. And how do you manage that? Well, you have to block out time in your diary, first of all, so you could look at next week and the week after and start putting in 2-hour blocks. But that is only as good as your discipline, right? So the second thing, and this is literally a talent that's really, really hard for you to master. And I'll give you an example because it's not about me saying that I've got this perfectly down. It's much easier for me to give my wife advice than it is for me to follow my own advice in that kind of classic way, is that you need to give yourself permission to say no. And this is a talent in itself. So it's very much about self-discipline because as Dom and I were chatting about just before we started recording, is I was saying that my business is going through a massive wave of growth. We've got loads of business development. Business development means lots of Zoom calls, lots of interactions. You're moving people to get a decision from them, hopefully to come on board as clients. When they come on board, we've got more Zoom calls because we've got all the project management and we do a lot of complex stuff. So we have to build all of that out, right? So I'm getting better at saying no to it, because the past couple of weeks have been quite stressful for me, because I've been generating my own problems because I haven't been giving myself headspace. I need headspace to problem solve for my clients. If I don't have headspace, then the quality of my service is going to go down. So I'm learning and giving myself permission how to say no. And it starts by blocking out time in your diary and you being disciplined about it. Because the only person that's going to win from that scenario is you, the client, which means everybody, your team, whoever you're interacting with. So saying no to stuff is actually a positive, but it scares us because the brain wants to keep us busy in the task mindset. Unless we're conscious of it, is controlling too much. And number 3 is share your achievements and challenges every day. My wife and I have got an alarm on my phone. It goes off at 6:15 every day. At 6:15, we sit down and we have a chat and we talk about time management. We talk about what you've been finding easy about saying no, what you've been finding difficult, any challenges, and it's great to share like that. Depending on your relationships, your home situation, you may want to do that with work. I'll give you one more example about my wife's work, is that they've now implemented one day every fortnight. They're a large corporation where nobody's allowed to do any calls. It's literally a company-wide rule, because they understand Zoom fatigue, they understand the stress, they understand the overloading components of it. Final thing, so not a tip, but just a thing to really hit home for you, is that you are the boss of your own time, not your habits, not your task mindset. If you make this conscious, you'll find tips 1, 2, and 3 are not particularly hard to do. And that's what I encourage all of you to look at. So I'm just going to leave these on the screen. That was it, quite a quick session for today. Do let me know if you had any questions. Okay, we are good. So quick session for today. I'll just give you a quick chance. No more questions. Yep, we're all good. So hopefully you enjoyed that session. Just make sure that, again, you're managing that task mindset, because filling up your time with meetings and Zoom calls and phone calls is never going to be the best thing for your productivity. So I just had a question from Paul. I'll tell you what the question is. What if my boss puts lots of Zoom meetings in daily? So the great question about this is that Paul is part of my team. So I think that you need to learn how to say no, Paul, and you could send your boss a video of this meeting so you could coax them into how to understand it and how to accept it. So I think that's one way to manage it. It was a great question. But otherwise, one more has just come in. What happens if we don't have time to process the call and Zooms, right? So the biggest challenge that you've got with that is if you don't have time to process it, that's when you literally feel overloaded. So that feeling of being overloaded is when you feel a little bit panicky, you can't think, you don't know how you're going to do everything, you just feel a little bit jittery, right? So it's panic stuff, it's anxiety stuff, it's stress stuff, and you won't always feel a direct connection to it. You know, I do a ton of work on emotions, right? And the thing about emotions that we have to recognize is that they're not a conscious thought, they're a feeling. So when your skin's up, when your arms feel a little bit tingly and stuff, that's a boost of your blood pressure, right? Which is generally where your anxiety and your panic is going to manifest itself. So when you can feel that in your fingers and within your arms and things like that, that's a sign that you're moving towards being overloaded. That's when you should take the time to go for a walk, to cancel a call, to do whatever you need to make sure that you've got that balance, because overloading yourself is not going to serve you, your clients, or your purpose. So you've got to be clear to the strategic way. The best way to think strategically is to give yourself headspace. Without headspace, you can't think. If you can't think, you're not going to achieve what you need to. Right, so thanks for the questions today. Thanks for your time. You can join us again on Tuesday. As I mentioned, CEO Huddle podcast interview with myself. We cover a bunch of different stuff about thinking and decision making. And check out Phil's article on LinkedIn, which is 60 lessons from 60 days of lockdown. But otherwise, we will catch you at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Have a nice weekend.